everyone. Okay, so this is a little longer version of the last video. It's about the Mechanics Institute massacre of 1866. This one goes into a little more detail. So, following the Civil War, an attempt to amend the state's constitution to grant black men the vote provoked a deadly reaction from white supremacists, sparking national outrage and significant reforms. The struggle for African Americans' political rights during the Reconstruction period as slavery ended in the wake of the Civil War met with several incidents of extreme racist violence. Now, side note, I have been gathering more information and I have so many lined up to do videos about. And some of them I'm having a little bit of trouble trying to find basic information. Like, one, literally, what I have found is like 3 sentences. But it was one that the police and the military decided to start the riot. And nobody was punished. Nobody went to jail. Nobody had even charges put against them. And there was like, I don't know, I want to say like 280 something African Americans that was killed. But what I'm finding is like literally like 3 sentences. And that is why I decided to go ahead and do this part because it is longer. And the video before this, I mean, yeah, it's a good size. It gives the information. But because there are so many riots and stuff that have little to none as far as the information goes, I'm seriously trying to do my best with making longer videos about them because every every single victim needs justice. Anyway, back to this. One of the most egregious occurred in New Orleans on July 30th, 1866, at the Mechanics Institute, a government building located where the Roosevelt Hotel now stands. Black Louisianans had fought courageously for the Union, but former Confederates quickly returned to power. An attempt to amend the state's constitution to grant the vote to black men provoked a deadly reaction, with the complicity of some city authorities. Dismissed as a riot by many supremacists, the massacre sparked national outrage and spurred significant reforms. Following the capture of New Orleans and surrounding parishes by federal forces in April 1862, Louisiana became a test case for readmission into the Union, even as the Civil War raged on. Divisions between white Unionist factions arose over the status of black Louisianans, with conservatives trying to limit their rights and radicals hoping to promote political equality. French speaking free people of color launched a campaign for voting rights using their recently founded newspaper, La Union, and personally lobbying President Abraham Lincoln. The new Free State Constitution, adopted in July 1864, abolished slavery but did not address black suffrage. Before long, the problems with this approach grew apparent. After the war's end and Lincoln's assassination in April 1865, former Confederates took control of the state legislature and New Orleans municipal administration. The harshly racist laws comprising the Black Code of 1865 sought to restore slavery in all but name. After the passage of the National Civil Rights Act of 1866, progressives in the newly formed Republican Party of Louisiana felt both cornered and somewhat emboldened. Realizing the need to mobilize the black vote, Governor James Madison Wells reopened the Constitutional Convention of 1864 in order to adopt universal male suffrage. The decision to reconvene the assembly generated controversy. Not only was the reconvening based on a technicality, thus casting doubt on its legality, but many also foresaw a violent outcome given the white supremacists' hostility. Though some authorities, like Mayor John T. Monroe, wanted to forbid the meeting altogether, preparations continued. Meanwhile, the Creole activists at the New Orleans Tribune, the successor of La Union, pressed for recognition of convention. On Friday, July 27, 1866, supporters organized a rally, drawing crowds of black residents. The militant tone of the speeches alarmed opponents. The following Monday at noon, 27 delegates gathered inside the Mechanics' Institute under the president of the convention. Outside, a parade of black veterans drew the jeers and belligerence of some white onlookers. Initially, neither police nor soldiers were present, and the region's military governor, Major General Philip Sheridan, had left for Texas. Tensions in the streets turned violent. When city police and auxiliary officers arrived, many of them aided in the mob attacks, hurling racist insults as they assaulted, chased down, and murdered supporters of the convention, as well as African Americans that were simply bystanders. Several policemen turned their guns on the meeting itself, shooting through the windows before entering the building. The convention's chaplain, Reverend Jonathan W. Horton, a native of Boston, received a fatal gunshot wound while waving a white handkerchief in surrender. The violence persisted through the afternoon, leaving numerous bodies of the wounded and dead in the streets. At 6 o'clock, the military arrived to declare martial law. The massacre claimed almost 50 victims, black and white. Though no friend of the convention, General Sheridan summarized his assessment in a telegraph to Ulysses S. Grant. The more information I obtain of the affair of the 30th in this city, the more revolting it becomes. It was no riot, it was an absolute massacre by the police. Even while the wounded lay in the hospital and families began to mourn their lost loved ones, the struggle to control the interpretation of events began in the press. Louisiana's white supremacist newspaper placed the blame squarely on the advocates of equal voting rights. The New Orleans Times wrote the riot was commenced in every instance by Negroes, spurred on by white men, and it is highly creditable to the police of the city that they succeeded in quelling it without military aid. The New Orleans Tribune painted a very different picture. A two-part report entitled Pages for a Narrative of the New Orleans Massacre, seen republished in papers across the North, claimed that municipal authorities had organized the attack. In late August, the Tribune printed eyewitness accounts from Octave Bro, a black veteran who had overheard plans to disrupt the convention through violence. The issues came to the fore during official investigations, culminating in a congressional report released. Several testimonies offer a rich source for historians who continue to debate the massacre's causes, with some attributing it to an explosion of racist rage, some to concerted action by the authorities, and others to economic rivalry between the racial groups. 1 year after the massacre, civil rights activists held a commemorative ceremony at the Mechanics Institute. Attendees sat before an altar draped with the banner that read, "In memory of the victims of the 30th of July," while Creole composer Samuel Snare played the organ and led the choir. Orators paid homage to the dead while decrying the crimes. Violence messages had reached the halls of power in Washington, along with events elsewhere that discredited the weak approach of Lincoln's successor, President Andrew Johnson. The massacre helped to usher in radical Reconstruction. Congressional action offered stronger support and robust guarantees of the rights of African Americans whose citizenship became enshrined in the 14th Amendment. Louisiana's Constitution of 1868 would outlaw racial discrimination, at least for a time. So that is, like I said, the longer version to the video that comes right before this one. The other video explains a little bit more about the street attacks and stuff like that. So both of them do play hand in hand. This is just sad. I don't know, it's hard to deal with knowing that people go unpunished for crimes like this. Have a good day, everybody.